Welcome to the Mind Solution podcast with Sarah Maud. The Mind Solution podcast is for leaders like you who are passionate about well-being in the workplace because you understand that a strong, resilient and happy workforce is the key to your organisation's success. The Mind Solution podcast is here to help you. So join us every week where we'll share with you powerful insights, strategies and know-how to ensure that your people and your organisation are truly thriving from the inside out. Okay, well, I am absolutely delighted to be joined today on today's podcast by David Blackburn, especially humbled to have him here because he's off on holiday after today. But David is the Chief People Officer for the Financial Services Compensation Scheme and very recently was awarded HR Magazine's third, very impressive, most influential HR practitioner in the UK for 2022. Welcome, David.
So, good morning. It's lovely to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I was very excited when they read out. They only read out the top three, so it's a good job I was in the top. When they said, "Oh, and number 3 is David Blackburn," I was very. There's lots of pictures of me jumping up and down. Very excited.
Oh, well, it's an incredible testament to who you are and the work that you've been doing. And I'd love you to actually just share a little bit for everybody that is listening about actually what you were doing in the background that bagged you such a fabulous award.
Well, unaccustomed to talking about myself. My husband is always saying, "Hey, you're not still talking about yourself, are you?" Yes, so I am the Chief People Officer of the FSCS. And for listeners, the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, we protect all regulated financial products in the UK. And since our launch in 2001, we have come to the aid of 6.5 million customers and paid out £26 billion in compensation. I've been here for almost a decade. I joined in 2013, but I've been in HR for about 25 years, which is a bit terrifying. It was my 25-year anniversary this year, actually. And so I've worked in lots of different sectors, but I guess why am I number 3 in the most influential practitioners list? I've done a lot of work. I'm really focused on how do we create cultures in organizations that allow people to give their best every day. I am really passionate about building better work. You know, if somebody said to me, "What's your personal mission statement?" That's pretty much it. And, whether that be, creating inclusive environments where people feel that they truly belong, driving the diversity and inclusion agenda. I'm really proud that the FSS is recognised as the UK's 4th most inclusive employer in the top 50 employers list. We have a predominantly female board and executive team. We have a gender pay gap that's 1.3% in favour of women, which I'm fairly certain we're almost unique in the financial services sector, being able to say that. But, how do we, my mantra that, I say, talk to my team about, all the time is, how do we make it easier for people to give their best every day? That's our job. That's what I think our job is. And, and I've done a lot of work in that space, and I've learned a lot, I guess, into my 25-year career about the stuff that works and the stuff that doesn't work. So, yeah. And I've won lots and lots of awards. So,
well, that just makes me even more honoured that you've graced us with your presence, my darling. And I absolutely love, David, what you said about how can we make it easy for people to be at their best at work. I think that sort of encapsulates everything. I really, really love that statement. And one of the things that we started to talk about before we hit the record button was the whole topic of well-being and mental health. And I know myself, when I still worked in HR, which is, gosh, probably about 11 years ago now, that well-being probably extended to gym subsidization and a bit of free fruit. Maybe.
I thought you were going to say free fruit. I always say, I'm some fruit in a bowl. Yes.
Potentially, there was always EAP schemes kicking around, but nobody ever really used them. So the whole conversation about well-being in the workplace, and particularly with the mental health focus, it's really come into being, I would say, in the last 5 years, with organizations finally making that link that it's not something that's pink and fluffy, but it's actually a strategic influence on the business to get this onto the agenda. And I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
So yes, as you said, we started just before you hit the record button. Said no, we must start recording because it's a subject I feel really passionately about. And you've hit the nail on the head, Sarah, about it being strategic. And what I see in organizations is that so often what happens is, so firstly, there's where does well-being sit? Who is the owner? Who is driving the well-being agenda in the organization? And I genuinely think it should be the people function. I think that is the right place for it to be owned and to be driven from. But I think that it has to be done in a way that is aligned to the delivery of your business strategy. It's not, and so often where people start is they start in the wrong place. So what they do is they say, okay, we need to do something about well-being. So the CEO will say, what are you doing about well-being, David? And so people in the HR team go, oh dear, I don't know. Well, let's we'll run a fitness class. We'll put. And it's true. I always say, and they'll put some fruit in a bowl. There'll be some free fruit. There'll be fruit on a Tuesday.
We'll have a
webinar. And so what they do, and then you use the lovely expression, Elliot, about like throwing jelly at the wall. Nothing sticks, and then they wonder why they get no traction. And the reason is because the question I always ask is, so what's it in service of? Why is it that we're doing these things? What's the reason for making this investment? What's the objective that we're trying to achieve? What's the outcome that we want to see? And the problem so often is that it's not within a strategic context. So back to, my opening statement. So if central to our people strategy as an organization is we want it to be easy for people to give their best every day, if that's a driver of our people strategy, what are the elements that support that? Well, well-being is absolutely central to that. So it's not a side of the desk thing. It's not something, oh dear, we've not done any well-being activities in the last quarter. We better quickly do something. It's actually saying, well, what's the long-term strategy around this? How do we say, we are supporting the mental well-being of our colleagues? And you're absolutely right. I think that the dialogue has massively changed in the last 5 years, but particularly clearly the pandemic has been a huge accelerator. And so lots of, the flexible working agenda, the importance of mental health, lots of really good things have come out of, the pandemic, that have, conversations and debates that have been happening for the last decade suddenly have all sped up because we've actually had to deal with them in real terms. So how do we support the mental health of our colleagues? How do we create a space that allows those conversations to happen? And looking at people, I think what's really interesting is that so often in the last 2 years, what I think's changed is when we say to each other, "How are you?" Which is a very throwaway thing that we used to say when we're in the office before the pandemic. "How are you?" And
you're not
fine.
I'm not
fine.
bad.
I'm okay. And you're not really even listening to the answer. You're sort of saying it and then you're wondering why they're responding. Whereas actually the reality is that because I think we have been immersed in each other's lives, the boundaries between personal and professional have become really blurred. We've seen much more intimately people's dogs, cats, children, loved ones, homes, all of that stuff. I think the powerful thing is that we know all of the survey research of the last 2 years says what colleagues want is greater emotional intelligence in their leaders. That's what they want. And a big element of that is saying, actually, you see me as a person, you know me as an individual, and I feel like I'm able to be myself in the organization. And well-being isn't the fruit in the bowl, isn't this separate thing over there. It's an absolute strategic pillar running through all of that. Because, if people don't feel that they're able to talk about their well-being, and you've not created the space for that dialogue, and they know what is available to them because you go as an organization, well, we know that highly engaged, if you're delivering a good employee experience and people are able to blend. I don't like the term work-life balance. I borrowed this with pride from somebody else who I heard speak recently and said we should talk about work-life blend, which I quite like as an idea. If we're helping people to successfully blend their work and home lives, their well-being should be one of our number one priorities. And I just think that if you're not doing that, you're never going to be able to get the best out of you.
Absolutely. And I loved I loved so much of what you said. I loved what you said about the strategic piece and really asking the question about why are we doing this? How does this contribute to the business and the strategic objectives? Because I have so many conversations with people in the people function. I also loved what you said about actually, where does it sit? Because I have numerous different strands of people contact us at the Mind Solution International, where they've maybe they're inquiring about webinars in the pay and reward function.
Yeah.
And they haven't had a conversation with their colleagues in the people function, who've not had a conversation with the people in the learning and development function, to think about what is it that you're trying to achieve with this webinar. We're not saying that you can't run a webinar, you shouldn't run a webinar, but thinking about why are you doing it? What are your business objectives? What are the learning objectives? What do you want people to walk away with? And then how are you going to measure that impact? If you're going to invest potentially £2,000 in a webinar, where's your return on investment? And more often than not, there isn't. That conversation hasn't happened.
Well, they don't. And also you're so right. It's because actually it's this thing about identifying an intervention, not having thought whether it is the right intervention or what the return on the investment is. But what they will be able to do is they'll be able to put a tick in a box that says, I ran a wellbeing session, I ran a webinar on mental health, I've done something this quarter, so actually when colleagues are saying, well, or the CEO is saying, what's this organization doing in terms of this space, or supporting colleagues? Oh, I draw your attention to the webinar that we ran 2 months ago. And you're absolutely right about saying, but then what's the impact? If the objective is, so we want to run a webinar to raise awareness, to start opening a dialogue, great idea, great thing to do, but that's having an objective. It's absolutely going, well, I'm doing it not because, then I can demonstrate I've done something. I'm doing it because it's in service of. My team get really, God, don't get him started on, and what's it in service of? What's it in service of? Why are we doing it? Because I say that all the time, because I just think, unless you're right, if we are making an investment, why are we doing that? What's the thing that we want to get out of it? And those sessions can be really, really powerful, but they're only powerful back to where we've gone. It's got to be part of a strategic roadmap that says, we talk about, well, what are the themes for this year? What do we see the wellbeing focus being in, like lots of organizations, right now we've had some really interesting conversations about, actually over the next 6 months, how do we support colleagues during the cost of living crisis? What does that look like? and that isn't just about, financial education sessions and all that sort of thing. It's again about saying, let's think about how we're helping people deal with their stress. Let's think about, the impact on people's home lives. Let's think about, we've all got very different lived experiences. Let's call it out. And I just want to give you, a real example. Our chief executive, Caroline Rainbird, writes a weekly message, and she talked about the cost of living last week in her weekly message, and a colleague wrote, it's an open forum, wrote back and said, I am incredibly anxious, it's causing me to have sleepless nights. And immediately, both I responded to thing, and she wrote so lovely, and I said, oh my God, I'm so lucky to work in an organization where A, I feel comfortable enough saying how I'm feeling, and B, that the chief executive and the chief people officer respond within minutes, and then somebody in the people team, reach out to you as an individual. But that's the whole, because, and I was able to say, but don't worry to this individual, because we've already been thinking about it, and watch this space because some stuff is happening, and we're doing some things. So I just think, it's joining the dots. It's not action for action's sake. It's action in service of something, of a strategic objective.
Absolutely, 100%. You're speaking my language, David. You are so speaking my language. And what I also find interesting is, again, if an organization are investing in something that's much more holistic, so maybe they've, for example, they've got their strategy, and then one of the tactics that feeds into that strategy might be, for example, management mental health awareness training. And one of the things that I am very much in support of, especially where we've gone online with so much training, is you don't just want to hit everybody with a day's training and that be it, because that's not how our brain learns. And it's about the consistency, it's about the follow-up, but to me, it's also getting the C-suite involved in these conversations about what would let you know that this program had been worth your time, your energy, and your financial investment. And what I find interesting, not all the time, but the idea of getting the C-suite involved in these conversations, for some HR professionals, they sort of scratch their head, and it's like, why would you want to talk to our chief exec or our president? Because it feeds into your strategy, and those conversations aren't happening. And again, I'd love your thoughts on that, David.
So I think that what's really interesting to me is that so if the challenge is to create a healthy organization, if that's the long-term objective, and what CEO, president, country head would not say, what I want to have is, a culture and an organization that is healthy and happy. And, that should absolutely be, that we should do that without even really thinking about it. But an absolutely central part of that is for your senior leaders in the organization, not just to have bought into it, but to be role modeling it. They should be role modeling. When you're looking up through the organization, when you look at senior leaders, they should be role modeling the behaviors that they're expecting. So in your example, Sarah, where you said, let's educate and train the management population in an organization. Absolutely the right thing to do, because managers, the people who are managing frontline teams are absolutely central to what you do in an organization. You get that layer right, that helps unlock a whole host of things, performance and potential. But actually, thinking about the people who are managing them, because we're all managers and leaders at whatever layer we are in the organization. And so I just think that it's, for me, I would put the question the other way. Well, why wouldn't not why would you? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you be engaging with the senior leadership? Because I just think that, I think, one of the things that we've been very successful in doing at the FSCS, claim all of the, it's not just a single, it's not, I've got the little single handed.
Are you not claiming all the glory here, David?
I'm very, very fortunate to work with, an executive team who, we see our role as, we talk about collective accountability. We say, as an executive team, we are collectively accountable for the delivery of the strategic outcomes of this organization. And we try to think about holistically and systemically about the challenges that we face. So we all make a contribution, not just based on our subject matter expertise, which we try to bear lightly, but actually we all have a view and an opinion about everything that affects the organization. And we try to, we don't always get it right, but we try actively to role model those behaviors so that people can see also that we care about each other. So also that at the senior level, they can see, and we talk, Caroline, myself, Caroline has spoken very openly about dealing with her personal grief when she lost her mother. Our chief communications officer has spoken, very openly and candidly about her challenges with fertility and trying to have a family. I've spoken about my own mental health issues in my 20s. I think that there's something it's so important, and people go, oh, well, they're doing it. And what's that signaling to the rest of the organization? What it's signaling to the rest of the organization is we recognize that mental health and all aspects of well-being are so absolutely important, and we need to be able to talk about them. And I just think, shielding, trying to keep and you are right. I mean, I'm an HR professional, as I said, 5 years of experience, and I'm a chartered companion of the CIPD, which is the highest level of membership because I've been around for so long. But I sometimes it's interesting because I talk to HR professionals. Sometimes HR professionals are part of the problem, being really candid. They are. And they're going, oh no, don't upset the boss, don't tell the CEO, don't thingy. Whereas I'm like, no, you need to get the CEO involved from the very beginning, don't you? I mean, isn't that not the, you cannot, and again, it's back to my question. The question we should be asking ourselves is, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Do you genuinely think, as a senior HR professional, or as the most senior people leader in the organization, that your CEO does not want the culture of the organization to be a healthy and happy one? Well, if they don't, then you're in the wrong. You need to get out. You need to get out, because that's probably not a very good place to work. But I think, sometimes you just have to, I think we need to be a bit less afraid. I don't understand why people think this is a contentious subject. I think my pitch would always be what I've just said. We're all invested in the health and well-being of our people. And that's why we're here. So surely we need to have a strategy that is role modeled and owned by the executive.
And I love what you said, because you're spot on. It's that where that strategic piece of the jigsaw puzzle is missing in organizations, that's where they're not looping back with their senior leadership team. And I guess, to be fair to our HR colleagues, I think historically learning and development activities have just sort of sat within learning and development, or the people function, or the HR function. And we've maybe not, I know, thinking about sort of my background in HR, we didn't necessarily loop in the chief exec and the C-suite in some of those conversations. But now it's that education piece, that we're not just talking about any old training development course here. We're talking about investing potentially thousands and thousands. We have to make this strategic if we want a clear, measurable return on investment. Because I know from speaking to any number of finance directors or chief finance, it's like Oliver Twist. You go with your bowl and ask for some more money, and they're not going to give any money if they can't say, well, what did we actually achieve with the last lot of training?
Yeah, and I think, just to build on that, I think the useful lens is that, the profession has, changed and evolved massively. And I think that, we talk a lot about, when I'm asked, describe your role in the FSCS, what does the Chief People Officer do? And I say, I am responsible for the end-to-end employee life cycle at the FSCS. And so actually, when you think about, our responsibilities through an employee experience lens, that I think is a really helpful mindset shift. I think that, as organizations, and particularly commercial organizations, obviously, but all organizations, we've been talking about customer experience for a really long time. It's a very, very well established idea. What are the moments of truth? What are the moments that matter? Where's the pain points in our customer journey? If you apply that same logic to your employees, if you say, from the moment somebody joins this organization, what does their journey look like? What are the significant moments? Where are the pinch points? Where do we need to step in and support them? Then it pulls together all of those strands. So actually, obviously we're a relatively small organization. We're about 250 people. So everything in the people world sits under my remit. So, I am responsible for all of it. I touch all of it. And so the difference, but if you're in a large organization, that's why I think where we'll have a separate L&D function, and somebody over here doing operational HR, and another bit over here doing recruitment and all of those things. Actually, when you apply the lens of employee experience, you say, well, we're all just in service of the same thing, aren't we? We should all be connected, because actually that's the thing that the hook, the thing that we're all contributing to, is saying, what does the lived experience of our employees look like in this organization? And irrespective of what team I sit in, surely we all need to be working together to make that experience as good as it can be.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, David. Now, something which I'd love to explore with you is something around conversations that I've been having with my own team recently, which is about mental health first aiders. And actually what our team are now going to start to run is supervision support, because something that we were very aware of is that mental health first aiders that usually go on to be mental health first aiders because they're passionate about the subject. They've maybe had a loved one who's had struggles with mental health, or they've had their own struggles with mental health. And whilst the mental health first aider training is great, it's a day, it's maybe 2 days, and then that's it. And if we think about some of the things that you've touched on, which people are experiencing, and I know myself, having been a therapist for more than a decade, that people are dealing with some really big stuff, heavy stuff, grief and suicide and addiction and miscarriages and toxic relationships at home. I could go on. And one of the questions that myself and the team were having was, how do we make sure our mental health first aiders are operating safely, that they're not feeling like they have to play the therapist, that they have to fix the problem, which I think a lot of them feel this sense of responsibility that they have to fix the problem. And they've got to do something, and just often are feeling really overwhelmed and out of their depth. So we said, okay, well, let's see where we can be of service, where we can bridge the gap. So we're going to start to run weekly supervision sessions for anybody that's got mental health first aiders and are interested in that. But I'd love your views around mental health first aiders and what they need in order to operate safely.
So this is a great topic. That's a great question. This is so firstly, actually, one observation I would make is that I've always, so I am a trained mental health first aider, and we have 14 in our cohort here at the FSCS who are and we are a very, I should say they are, because actually you won't be surprised to know that I'm perhaps not surprisingly, people don't want to come and tell the Chief People Officer all of their all of their troubles. So often I think the group engage with more people in the organisation than I do, but they are one of the strengths, I think, is they're a very mutually supportive group. But what I want to say is that I've always slightly struggled with the term mental health first aider, because in of itself, I think you're right, Sarah, that I think that causes some of the pressure and the concern that mental health first aiders feel. Because if you think about being a first aider, a first aider, training means, I can put you into the recovery position and I can put a plaster on, I can do all of those things because it means I can do something in that moment. And I've like you, I've wrestled with that thinking that says, I wonder if there's something in the way by calling it that then people go, oh, I've got to fix something. Then I've got to be delivering a solution, and obviously so I think it's massively important. I love the sound of the work that you're doing, because I just think it's really important that how you support them as a group. So our group gets together on a regular basis, and also really reinforcing that message that says, if what's the escalation route? Is there an established route in the organization that says, when someone says, I've just been I had a coffee with Sarah and I'm anxious about how she's feeling, what's the next, because I think we're very, very clear, right, we do the 2-day training thing, and then after we have we do refreshment every year. That does not make me a qualified therapist. That doesn't make me, now I might have my own views and my own thoughts and my opinions and all that thing. That thing, it's a bit like non-directive coaching in my mind, and actually, which is quite hard, because again, I think our natural instinct as human beings and as colleagues, we know these people, is to go, oh my God, how do I make it right? Yeah. How can I fix it? How can I fix this challenge? And so I think it's massively important that you're constantly reinforcing that message with them as individuals that says, our expectation is not that you go and fix things. Actually, it is, creating a safe space, for people to share their anxieties and their concerns. Now, also, what we're very clear about saying is, if based on your training, you go, actually, this is ringing an alarm bell and it's making me concerned, you're actually making sure that then you have somebody in the people team and we say, well, actually, this might be them accessing, support through our medical insurance, because we've got private medical insurance. We've also got occupational health, and we've got a long-standing relationship with the Nightingale Hospital in London, which has been invaluable over the years. So actually, that thing that says, but I think that is so important. And how do you then? So I said, at the start, I've been in HR 25 years. I spent 10 years working in social housing. So I worked with teams who were supporting people with mental health issues, who were dealing with people who were the victims of domestic violence. And so we were always going, what's the group coaching you do with them as individuals? How do they, when you help them decompress after a week of dealing with, really challenging issues? So I just think, for me, I think it's first, being really clear about what your expectations are, and then making sure that you're supporting them to support each other. I think you're, what you're talking about is absolutely the right approach.
Well, I'm delighted that you think so. I really am delighted, because it's something I know very passionate topic, because I mean, in the last 10 years, I've probably held about 10,000 one-to-one sessions with people as a therapist. I know the kind of stuff that comes out of conversations. And I also know from speaking to so many mental health first aiders that stuff that's coming out it can be sort of rabbit in headlights. And they can take it on, as you said, their own shoulders, feeling a sense of responsibility. And there is that natural inclination in humans that you've just shared something with me. I've got to try and make you feel better.
Yes. Yes.
And if they don't have the skills to be able to, as you use that indirect coaching, I mean, we too teach solution-focused coaching, but also to help the mental health first aiders so that they don't take on everybody else's stuff and end up sort of being a victim of circumstance.
Yes, exactly.
But to have that group coaching by people that actually are trained professionals and have worked with people and can continue to drip feed training, because in my personal view, and it's only my personal view, but to put somebody on a 2-day training course and then not have training again for another year, it's like you wouldn't expect somebody to go on a driving course and then, I mean, how many lessons does it take for us to be able to drive a car?
And you're right, sorry. It's the thing that it takes it back to this, it's back to my analogy about its starting point in this idea about first aid, because actually that's what physical first aiders do. It's the same. What we've done is basically taken one model and just apply it in the same way. They do. Once a year you go and do your refresher and you do CPR on the rubber dummy. And it's not. Of course, it's absolutely not not the same. And I just think, how you continue to support people through that journey to make sure, as you say, that they're not overwhelmed, but also that they're continuing to develop their skills in supporting their colleagues.
Yeah. Well, that feels a beautiful place to leave it, David. And I know that you want to go home and pack your suitcase for your holidays. You've got that holiday smile on your face.
Well, actually, I look like this all the time, so.
I love that. Well, you can tell that it's clearly a very joyful place to work, because you do have a big smile on your face. For all the listeners that are listening to this and can't see this, it's not just because it's Friday and David's off on holiday. But thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful, enlightening and informative conversation, David. I love everything that you said, and I really hope that it's given any HR, learning and development CEOs listening into this really food for thought about taking things back to that strategic level, really focusing on what they're doing, why they're doing it, what their intention is, and how that they can measure it in a way that we can demonstrate the return on investment. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I could talk you as I know that we could both talk all day about this this topic. But I have really enjoyed it.
No, thank you. And for anybody that's listening that's interested in our mental health first aiders support and supervision program, do get in touch with us at info@themindsolution.com. But for now, happy Friday, everybody. Sending lots and lots of love to you all. And David, have a wonderful holiday.
I will do. Thank you, Sarah.